Welcome to this lecture on the surveillance design framework developed by the RISKSUR project. My name is Fernanda Dórea, and I am pleased to represent the RISKSUR team that developed this framework. RISKSUR is an international research project funded by the European Union from 2012 to 2015. This research has advanced cost-effective methods to support surveillance design and evaluation for the surveillance objectives of early detection, disease freedom documentation, case detection, and disease frequency estimation. In the context of cost-effective surveillance practice, we have organized methods in a cycle of surveillance design, evaluation, and redesign, and developed or collected tools to support the steps shown in this slide. Evaluation is supported in a specific tool, the EVA tool, also developed by RISKSUR. This lecture will focus on introducing a framework for design, documentation, and redesign. You should see the framework as a guided tour of the process of surveillance design. It helps the user navigate through the steps needed, epidemiological tools, and great amount of advice available, but it does not take decisions or make assessments for the user. The framework is therefore targeted at surveillance designers. It aims at supporting an individual, or most likely a team, who has knowledge on epidemiology and surveillance and is supported by laboratory personnel and economist advisors. The starting point is the task of designing a surveillance system. A surveillance system is defined in the framework as all activities with a defined objective, against a particular hazard, in a specific area, targeting a defined population, and based on an understanding of risk distribution. An example of a system would be surveillance to demonstrate freedom from blue tongue in Germany. This surveillance system would be composed of a number of surveillance components, which are the individual activities targeting specific segments of the animal population. Each of those activities in turn requires a number of steps, such as collection of samples, laboratory analysis, etc. Translating this process to the framework, the designers will first be guided through defining the system, then selecting surveillance components needed to achieve the defined objective and provide needed coverage of the population. Finally, for each of these components individually, the designers will be guided through 12 more steps aimed at organizing the information available and the process of decision-making based on those information. The framework is provided as two complementary pieces: an actual tool where information is collected and the surveillance design is documented, and a wiki page where all users can contribute to the body of advice available for each step. This is the welcome page of the wiki. Start writing one of us in the RISKSUR team to be granted access to the wiki. Our emails are in the last slide of this training session. Once you're on the wiki, start downloading the tool. This presentation will focus on the offline Excel version of the tool, but a web app is also being developed, and when available, we'll place the links here on the wiki and on the RISKSUR website. You need to enable the content of the Excel because it has macros. And you see the welcoming screen. You can take some time getting adjusted to the interface, but I will walk you through those details. You click here to get started designing surveillance. You can fit to the screen to make it larger or smaller as needed. Every step has this layout with the content here and a navigation structure here on the right, where you can jump to one specific step of the surveillance design process, or we recommend you take one step at a time and click Next. The questions will usually be with this white background, and the yellow cells are the ones you're expected to fill with free text. I'll use a mock-up example for this demonstration. So it's asking the name of my surveillance system, and I'm going to say BVDV surveillance in Sweden. So my hazard is going to be BVDV. Next. The next step, I'm still on the surveillance system level. It's going to ask a few details about my surveillance objective. What's the state of the disease in the country? I'm going to click on Confirmed Absent. So my goal is going to be freedom from disease. If I have any doubts, any questions about these options or what is the correct option for my case, that's when I should visit the wiki. So the wiki was intended to be used side by side with the framework. The structure of the wiki here on the navigation has the same steps as the framework. So I'm going to go to Surveillance System. And if I scroll down, I can find the step I'm currently in, step 1.2. And it has some advice to help me figure out what should be my surveillance objective given the status of the disease in the country. As I proceed in the framework, I'm asked a few more questions. There is a free text option here to document all the information I have about disease freedom for this disease in my country. What's the risk of introduction? I'm going to say, for instance, low, but you may need help of risk assessment tools. And then a few more questions about what level of disease freedom demonstration I am going to apply in this case. I'm going to leave as country, maintain disease freedom after eradication, absolute freedom. And again, if I had questions about those options, I would just come to the wiki and read through the advice that is provided there. If I click on Next on the framework, the next question is about the geographical area. And then it asks for the susceptible population. I am going to say cattle. I could check as many as appropriate. I could also add some details here as free text, and this all helps with the documentation later. And then there are some questions about risk characteristics, where again you may find the need to consult the wiki and get help about what do we mean with risk characteristics at the population level, herd level, animal level, and what we have defined as risk of infection, risk of introduction, detection, and consequences. So again, just as an example, not necessarily real data, I could say, for instance, that one of the population level risk factors could be a high risk of introduction close to the border. Temporal risks could be, for instance, when we have vector-borne diseases, there could be a higher risk of infection in some seasons of the year. A typical herd level risk could be, for instance, breeder herds having a higher risk of consequences. And here I could actually click as many risks as I want. And then I'm going to again click on Next. I'm going to focus on the framework for the next step is just a review of all the answers I provided and a chance to document more information about my system for reference in the future or for documentation before other countries. So questions about legal requirements, economic impact, and so on. So you see throughout the framework that it gives you an opportunity to organize the information you need to take decisions, but also gives you a chance to document information that may be needed when this system is being reviewed. The next main step is to decide what are the surveillance components of my surveillance system. So I'm going to say, for instance, that to prove BVDV freedom, I'm going to perform a serological survey, serological screening in beef farms. So that's one activity of my system. The target species, the drop down here will always list all the species that we have chosen as the susceptible population here in 1.4. I only chose cattle, so there is only one option here. And the target sector case is going to be beef. I'm going to cover all the country, not a specific region. Collecting samples at the farm for a survey. So it's going to be antibody detection in blood serum. My second component is going to be a survey in dairy farms, and there I have the option of using bulk milk. But because so many of my activities are going to be similar for those two components, instead of filling in a whole new component, I'm just going to say that component number 2 is a duplication of component number 1. So the framework is going to paste all the information from component 1 into the second component throughout the framework, and I only need to provide information when that information may be different from the first component. So for instance, the species is still cattle, but the sector this time is dairy. The geographical area is the same. I'm also collecting samples at the farm and doing antibody detection, but this time on milk. I don't need to repeat any of the other information. I could enter a third component here. I could duplicate component 1 again if I wish. You can add up 20 components. And now we really enter the surveillance design for each of those components. So if I go next, my first step is the objective and target population. Throughout the framework, cells in yellow are opportunities to enter free text. Cells in pink are drop-downs, and you have to select one option. And cells in green are questions that you have already answered elsewhere and are just pasted here for your convenience. So we already answered, for instance, what are the species and sector. If you want to add more information about the target species, you can add on the free text. In this demonstration, I'm not going to fill in every question. I just want to walk you through a few steps so that you understand the main features that the framework provides. Here, for instance, the name of the second component has been copied from the first component. Only on this first screen of the design, the step number 3, I can change the name. So I can say this is not just a copy of the first, this is a bulk milk surveillance component. And now I can answer all the questions for the design in parallel for those two components at the same time. So here there are questions about the surveillance objective and target population. You can go through those questions, answering them, adding some free text if needed. The next step is disease suspicion, which on the advice here it says it may not be relevant for active surveillance, but more for passive surveillance. Since I am doing active surveillance, I'm just going to skip this step. Any step in the framework can be skipped. Nothing is mandatory, but the more information you enter, the better decisions you can make, and the better report you're going to get at the end. Step number 5 is about enhancements, which is also more appropriate for passive surveillance, so I'm going to skip again. And on step 6, I would have a chance to define my testing protocol For instance, what's the test that is going to be used? We already said it's antibody detection in plasma or in milk, but now you can enter the specific name of the test or any other details that the laboratory has provided you with. You can hover over the question mark when you need help with the terminology we're using. Just want to skip through a few more sections to show you a few more features. For instance, here on the study design, when you're asked about sensitivity and specificity of the testing protocol, if you need help calculating sensitivity and specificity, this icon means a link to a specific tool that will help you with that. In the next step, for instance, which is sampling strategy, you are guided through collecting all the information needed for sample size calculation. And then when you actually get to the step of sample size calculation, we've again placed a link to a tool that will help you doing just that. So what I wanted to emphasize is that throughout these steps, you're guided through what is the decision you need to make, what is the information you need to collect, and what tools can you use to make that decision. But all the decisions still lie on the designer side. There are, as I said, up to 14 steps, and when you're done, you can use the function of reporting, which will generate an automated report of the design you have created. If you click here to activate the report, it will adjust the rows to the amount of content you added, it will remove components you have not used, and then you can click Save as a PDF to create a PDF report of your design. I have not entered a lot of information during this demonstration, but you can still see that the components designed are documented here, and there is one report for each component, each of the 2 components I created. The enhancements, for instance, have been suppressed because I didn't provide an enhancement. So the report is tailored for the amount of information you entered, and you can use this report for later reference when you're trying to remember how the system was designed, or for documentation before other countries. The demonstration so far covered design and documentation. As mentioned previously, this framework does not address evaluation. Refer to the RISKSUR website to access the EVA tool for evaluation. Assuming a user did perform evaluation, there may be a need for redesign, that is, to improve performance according to some target attributes. Once a surveillance system has been designed using the framework, the user can choose an evaluation attribute to target. You can access the redesign function on the framework through the tab on the bottom, or from any step by clicking on the surveillance redesign icon. Once a surveillance design has been documented in this framework, the user can choose any evaluation attribute, let's say sensitivity, in order to review their design with the goal of improving sensitivity. In this redesign page, the same steps covered by the framework are listed, now all in one page, and the answers previously provided are all pasted here. But now the steps that have the most potential to impact sensitivity are highlighted, and some advice is given about what decisions can be made to improve sensitivity. For instance, you could review your screening and confirmatory tests to use tests with higher sensitivity. So this is just a chance to review the design previously documented in order to improve performance to this specific evaluation attribute. On the wiki, All this information has also been pasted. As I said before, the navigation structure of the wiki resembles the framework very close. You have all the steps of design and then all the steps of redesign, including the information about each evaluation attribute and which steps of the surveillance design they impact the most and how. Explore the navigation on the wiki and consider contributing to it. Anyone can edit the wiki. In summary, the framework presents a structured approach for surveillance design, redesign, and documentation, supported by epidemiological and statistical tools, and by advice through the wiki. We are continuously placing a lot of content in the wiki, but the wiki will be as good as users are willing to make it by participating actively in discussions. In every page of the wiki, there is a forum for discussions. If you add a discussion to the page, it will show up at the bottom. You can actually also edit the page directly. We, the organizers, can see what was changed and revert if necessary, or refer to the discussions to see about what users think about those changes. You can do more things such as follow the page and be notified when changes are made. We trust the users will keep the wiki alive. So please, write any of us to gain access to the wiki, and don't hesitate to also send us feedback and suggestions. We hope the framework will be helpful in your surveillance designing tasks, and if it is, please consider keeping the wiki active. Thank you for your attention.